back to Vectorworks 2013. I'm James Russell, and this is the Design 2A series episode 5B. Now, as you can see here, I've drawn a really quick and nasty house, which is, in my opinion, never really going to be practical in its sense. It's 20 metres long and 10 metres wide. It's also got a nice grassy field surrounding it. It's got a fence line down either side, and a nice little footpath and road out the front of it. But the reason I've drawn this is not for the house nor any of the other components, to show off a couple of other things that we can do in Vectorworks, as I discussed at the end of 5A. If you haven't seen 5A, I suggest you jump down into the video description below and find the previous episode and have a look. Now, looking at this, it's a little bit spectacular. We've got ourselves into a walkthrough view here, and if you're wondering how we do that, we're going to discuss that in our next series, the Design 2B series. So I'm going to jump over that, but I am going to discuss saving views. It's one of the three topics that I want to talk about today. Saving views is really handy when you found yourself in a view that you really like, as for example this one is. I want to save this view. I want to return to it later, but I do need to do other things first, which might mean that I would compromise this view and I'd forget how to get here. We're going to go up here, and there's a little page with some mountains in it, and it's called Saved Views. You can left click on the button, but you can also get the drop down options here, which is Save View and Edit View. The advantage in saving views is that it means you can come back to them later on. So I'm going to call this isometric walkthrough. I normally do WK and then 01, just so you give it a label. Now this can be anything you wanted. It could be top plan view of a certain portion of the house. It could be an isometric view of a bug. It doesn't really matter. It's just whatever can reference back to you for the view name. And you can see all these checkboxes are currently checked. It means it's going to save orientation, the zoom and pan, page location, if all the pages are covered under unified view, and the render mode as well. Layers and classes are normally included anyway. Render mode is normally the one that you'll probably check on or check off, depending on if it's going to take a lot of processing time to get you back to this stage. I'm in OpenGL at the moment, as we discussed in 5A, one of the rendering styles you can possibly have. So I'm going to leave the render mode on because it's quite snappy and quick. So if I hit OK now, it doesn't really tell me anything, doesn't give me a confirmation. I'm going to jump back to my plan view here. The moment I've gone, I'd really like to go back to that view, I can simply drop this menu down, and you can see I now have my titled ISO walkthrough 1. Left clicking on that instantly takes us back to this position here, and will re-render anything that needs to be re-rendered. So that's really handy to know, good to get back to if you've saved a couple of views to show off to a client or a designer. It's entirely up to you on how you use that. Now the reason that I've done that is so I can show off our next two tools, one of them being section viewports and one of them also being the image props. I'm just going to get a couple of documents set up now, and then we're going to come back and talk about image props. Okay, so I've been Googling for a few images now, and I'm all set up and ready to go. So we're going to have a go at creating image props. Image props is when you have a source image or file that you find really nice, but you don't want to have to bring it into Vectorworks as a texture or redraw it or any of those things. You just like to have it as a representation in your 3D world. That's the ideal purpose of image props. So, straight out, we're going to try and bring in an image. I'm going to right click in my resource browser and choose New Resource, then select the Image option. Bringing up this, it gives us this little dialog box here that says import an image from file or reuse an image from another resource. We don't currently have any other resources available to us, so I'm going to import from image file. Hitting OK, and I've got a folder here that I've already got set up that has a couple of images in it for me. We've got just a little tree and two bigger trees. I'm going to choose the middle tree, and we'll start off with that and see how we go. So as we hit OK there, we get this options here. This is the image import options, and it basically says would you like a JPEG or a PNG, just two different image types. JPEGs are most commonly smaller with more compression on them. PNGs normally keep a layer value to them and also have some level of transparency. It's entirely up to you. This image is currently a JPEG, so I'm just going to keep it as that, may as well. Hitting OK, and you can see it's created that as an image file up here in our resource browser. From the model menu, I'm now going to choose Create Image Prop. So left clicking on that, it gives us the same dialog that we had before, import an image file or reuse from a current resource. Now, I just like to have the image here as a base point. I can then use it for other things. You can just jump that and go straight to import. But I'm going to choose reuse, and I'm going to select our document name, which was URL for this particular image. I probably could have relabeled it, but too late now. Hitting OK, and I'm going to call this tree wide. It's given us a height and a width here by default of the image size, and it's also locked the aspect ratio, which means a change in height will also occur a change in width. This can be handy. You can decheck it if you'd like to scale things differently yourself. Now this is the most important option for image props in my opinion. There is a little check down here as well, it's important, but you can choose to have no mask, which means it'll just place that image down, but that white background that that image currently has will still exist around it. Or we can use the feature called masking. So I'm going to click Use Mask and create a mask. From here we get the same options: import another image from file or reuse an image from another resource. I'm just going to reuse this image and I'll explain why in a second. It comes down to this next box here, and this box is asking us, do we want to have grayscale pixels or a transparent color? Grayscale pixels basically means the more white a pixel is, the more transparent it is, and the darker a pixel is, the less opaque it is. It means you can't see through it. So if you have a black and white image, the black lines are going to be there and the white lines are going to be transparent. Or you can choose a transparent color. In this particular instance, I'm going to choose transparent color, and we'll hit OK. It's given us this dialog box here, and it's automatically chosen white as our transparent color, which is what I would have chosen anyway. So here's our original source image on the left hand side, and on the right hand side we have our transparent color mask showing a black and white mask between these. So the black is the transparent in this case, and the white is what we're going to end up with as solid bits. You can play with these sliders here to match the tolerance. So if I increase the slider here, it'll only accept things that are more white or less white. So if I bring it all the way down the bottom, it should be highlighting anything that is pure white. It will get rid of that. Anything that's not exactly pure white, it will make sure that's not see-through. And if I bring the slider all the way up the other way, it'll say pretty much everything that's close to white, which in the maximum example is everything's pretty close to white, it'll get rid of. You want to play with this until you get it about right. I think for me it's going to be somewhere down here. I'm going to say that's pretty darn close, and you've also got the contrast of the mask as well if you want to play with that slider to get a bit more definition in your image. But from there I'm going to hit OK. Now there's a couple other options here: cross planes, which is what I'm going to do with my next example, so keep that one in mind. Constant reflectivity, which means that light is going to be constantly bouncing off this at an equal rate, also picked up at an equal rate. You can create a plugin object, which is what we want to do. We want to keep this object smart as opposed to just being a plonk down, just plain object, I guess. And you also want to have a look at these two here. Create a symbol, which means you can use it again and again and again if you're going to keep creating trees. We're just going to have one for now. And this checkbox here, this is probably the most important and tricky one that comes along with image props. Do you want it to auto-rotate to the viewer? I'm going to leave it checked for now, and then we're going to de-check it later and see what happens. Hitting OK. And you'll see from our top plan view we should get a little orange line appear. There it is right there. If you have a look here, there's our little orange line. It's a selected object. I'm going to drag that right out here to the front, and then you can see here over on the right hand side my object info now has image prop and one option, texture, under our render tab. All those three checkboxes are now located down here along with rotation, height and width. Straight out though, I'm going to go to the saved view that I created just about 5 minutes previous to this. ISO WK01. Now what you can see here in my little document is I've got a transparent tree that's growing in the front yard of my place now. I'm going to jump back here and bring it a little bit closer to us, and I'm also going to scale it up. So the height now, I'm just going to make that about 4000, and the width should scale automatically. You can see it's jumped up there to 4600 as well. Going back to our view now, there's our tree. And it's placed in the front of our yard. You can see it's got a little grey base, which we could probably get rid of if we played with that transparency value. But you'll also notice, as I use my walkthrough tool here, and we're going to obviously play with this later on, but as I skate around the front of our yard and have a look, that tree is in fact transparent. It's got some white fluffy edges, which you'd have to play with the masking value, but you can actually see the render and brickwork beneath that. Now what was I saying about rotate the object to the viewer perspective, that third checkbox that we were kind of debating about? Well, basically this tree is always going to be facing us at the moment. If I can select it, that is. We might have to jump back into a top plan view here and then jump back into an isometric. You can see that that auto rotate is currently selected, and even though that plane that it's sitting on is currently facing on a strange angle to us, almost running parallel but not quite, as you can see indicated by the orange box, this tree has chosen to face us head on. I'm going to de-check the menu just to show you what I mean here, and that tree should go back to being a flat object. As we rotate around that tree, which I'll do now as the base point, you can see that object is in fact flat on the plane and is a 2D object when I look at it this way. The advantage of turning that auto rotate on, and this works especially well if people are meant to be looking at you or if something's meant to be coming at you head on, that tree is going to stay rotating to our focus no matter where we look at. So it's a user preference that you're really going to have to play with and make up your mind about. So what I'm going to do now is create a second one of these image props, just to go through the process again. So, because I like to, I'm going to import the image from here. I'm going to import an image from File. I'm going to choose my thinner tree this time and hit Open. And I'm going to keep it as a JPEG, just this time. There we go, 393-tree is our object. So from the Model menu, I'm then going to choose Create Image Prop. I'm going to reuse an image from another resource, and our 393 tree has appeared in this drop-down list here. Hitting OK, I'm going to call this Tall Tree. Very original. I'm going to crank up the height of this to about 5 meters, and you can see our width has automatically changed. And I do want to use a mask. I don't want that wide area. I'm going to reuse the 393 tree image, and I'm going to choose the transparent color. And it's automatically picked up our transparent color is white there. It's given us some good patterns here. I might turn that matching tolerance up a little bit, but I think it's okay for now. Hitting OK. And this time I'm going to decheck rotate to viewer, but I am going to check the option called crossed planes. Now what you'll notice when I've hit OK this time is instead of a flat object, and I do not want to save right now, I've been given a cross object. This is quite a small cross object, and for some reason it's got a height of 500. That might have been a misclick on my behalf. That's better now. Now, what you can imagine here, this is one flat plane. What it's done here is duplicate this in both our X and Y planes. So as I go back to our isometric view here, what you should see is this tree actually has two components to it. As I rotate up here, hopefully you can notice a bit more, that on top it has both an X and a Y plane of the same tree image. Now what's the advantage of this over rotate to viewer? Sometimes it's better off to have two separate planes and a non-rotating object towards you. A, for render power, and B, mainly just for the look of things. It might look a bit peculiar if that object is always facing us, especially in a direction that it shouldn't be. Whereas in this mode here you can see I get a similar result, but it's still a 2D object being calculated on the 2D plane. These can obviously be rotated in many forms. That's the image prop. It's really handy if you want to put people in, if you want to put cars in, objects that you don't actually want to draw. And you can obviously duplicate these as symbols, or do multitudes of other things with them along fence lines, create trees and forests, anything that you can imagine really. Just bring an image in and place it into your render. We're going to jump ahead to section viewports. I'm just going to get it set up now. Okay, so I've just pulled up an old project that I was working on in the 2012 series, Lesson 2B I think, the Lego Challenge. If you haven't seen that series, it's worth a look. There's some things in there that might be new, good examples as well. So this is a task where we all had to make a Lego model, and sometimes I provided one. This is one that I had to go at, just a good sketch of some Lego. We're going to use this for our section viewport examples. So the first thing I'm going to do here is just make a regular viewport so we know the difference. So I'm in a plan view at the moment. From the view menu down to create viewport, and I'm going to just type in some of the data here. So this is the plan. Also my drawing name is plan. I don't want to put in the overview. I've made a new sheet for this called our section viewport examples. I'm going to leave it at 1:1 and or wireframe and see what happens. There it is on our page, and because this is actually Lego, it fits quite well to the page. I might even scale that up a notch so that it's 2 times the size. We'll try that out and see how we go. We might have to go to 1.5. Now, section viewports is when you don't actually want to take a viewport that's a plan view, a front view, a side view, an isometric. You'd actually like to slice it up a bit more. In this example, I'm going to try and do a section viewport that cuts this plane in half and shows us what it would look like if we sliced it there and had a look back towards one side. Now, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can either do it on the drawing, or you can do it on a viewport itself. The advantage of doing it on a viewport, and my computer's just thinking about re-rendering this now, that's one of my previous drawings. The advantage of doing this on a viewport itself is that you'll get section markers in, and if you don't know what that means, you'll get to see them in about 3 minutes time. So what I'm going to do is first select this drawing here, just with a single left click so it's got the border selected. Then from my view menu I'm going to select section viewport. Now it says up here in the top left hand corner, click to begin section line, and I simply want to just start this somewhere at the front of my drawing, and I just want to drag this line all the way across here and left click again. Now you can see it's asking me which side with this arrow would I like to take. I probably want to look this way, so that's the direction that we're going to look from this line back towards the object, and with a double left click there, you'll see we get this dialog box up, Create Section Viewport. Now we say what we'd like to name it. It's going to give it a logical name. It asks where we would like to create it, so I can create it on one of my other sheets or this current sheet. That sounds pretty good. Give it a drawing label. Why not? We're going to make this drawing number 2 because it's the second in our series, and it's going to be front section, because we're looking at it from the front of this object in the perspective that we've got it at the moment. Layers we'll just leave, and it will pick those default layers up from the current viewport, and it's going to put it in the rendering style of hidden line. We'll have a look what that looks like in a moment. The other properties we might have a look at after we've created this. Hitting OK, and what it should do is place a viewport near this object, there we go, that's similar to this object in terms of sizing, but you can see it's actually taken that and made a section of it. I'm just lining this up properly, and there you go. So that's as if we slice this along that line across here. I might have to go into the annotations of this and fix up a few bits and pieces, such as moving this across for some reason, popping that into there. So you can see the section line has been created across there for us, and this is the representation of our section down here once it re-renders in. There we go. Now anytime you see this red border, as we've probably discussed in about lesson 4, it just needs an update. So we can left click on the viewport itself, and over here click the update button, and it will redraw that for us there. Now at the moment this is just showing components that are on that line right there. It doesn't show components beyond that line necessarily. It just shows the ones that it's cutting through, and you can see it says it's cutting through these ones here. It's showing some objects there in the background, and that probably goes on forever. Let's have a look at some of the advanced properties for this object. And there's 3 main categories that fill in here: the length range, depth range, and height range. Because we've drawn this 2D line here on this viewport, it said basically I'm just going to show everything that's beyond this. Anything I've cut through, I'm going to give this kind of solid fill through here. And I'm going to show some other objects behind in my hidden line mode. So the length range here, it's automatically picked up that's going to be limited by the section line length. That means from this point to this point and no further. If there were objects beyond these 2 marker points that we've placed down, it's not going to show them. We could make that infinite, and it would show everything along that line there. The depth range, we can make that infinite or finite. In this case it's given itself a depth of 6 meters, which is quite extreme for this object here. May as well be infinite because this Lego object's probably only about 15 centimeters wide. If we were to make this finite, and I might drop this back to say, let's try 30 millimeters, and I'll hit OK. After I click update on this, hopefully it's going to cull out 1 or 2 of those values. We'll just have a look and see if we can do it to the annotations here as well. If you have a look, it's created this dashed line now, and that's saying it's only going to render as far as this dashed line pertains. So in this case it's cutting off a bit of that wing and that there. Now that's not going to affect us. This wheel here is shown, and let's say for example we would like to not see that wheel. I'm going to grab this and drag it back down so that we're not including the wheel in our search criteria for this section, I guess you could say. So we've altered the depth range there, and this says there's been a change I need to update. We hit the update button and we should see that wheel get somewhat removed. It's kept in one of those components that was inside, but by limiting that section line depth we've cut the wheel out. This is particularly handy if you don't want to show additional walls in buildings, if you don't want to show additional set items that might be behind a flat or something like that. Now there's a third option here that we didn't discuss. We're going to go back in now, and it's the height range, and that's simply the same as the depth range. How high do you want us to show? Because obviously in this plan view we can't represent height with that single one line. At the moment it's infinite, show me everything above it, but from the ground plane we could also define a finite height, an end height and a start height. So if obviously leaving that at zeros, it starts on the ground plane and then goes up a certain distance, or you could raise or lower that depending on your object. There's also some attribute stuff here, so merged or separate cross sections. Basically this means here I've built this Lego object as a series of Lego blocks, so this mass here that's been joined together shouldn't actually be done. It's merged those together, making them one cross section. I could separate those cross sections, and there's some class object stuff here, what type of fill should be used for the objects beyond the section plane, some scaling factors for lines, and then some display stuff as well in that third tab. Would you like it to be black and white, flipping of text, etc., etc. I'm just going to put separate cross sections on to show you once I hit OK and then update the viewport, that we should see separate components that have been cut here. So they're all the Lego blocks that have been individually cut throughout this process. That's quite a nice view there to give you a breakdown of it. Now, as I was saying, you can do this straight off the actual design layer itself. The disadvantage is, though, that you won't have the section line marker appear in your viewport. It will instead appear on this plane. So, for example, from the View menu, Section Viewport, and then if I wanted to come and just do the back section of this tail here, I'm going to get some markers up, try and snap in there, across to this side, snap in here, facing this way, and double click. It will once again ask me where I'd like to place this, viewport section examples, hitting OK. And you can see that's that tail section of the plane there. If I rotated that left once or twice, it might make a little bit more sense, and update that. So those are the components that from this point here backwards towards the tail appear. As of around 2011, Section Viewport was the only other additional viewport you'd have apart from standard viewports. There's two new inclusions that I've found working through the 2012-2013 series that are worth referencing at the very least. The first one's the Detail Viewport, and I'm just going to jump back to the plane here. And we're going to do a detail here of the tail area. So what I'm going to do is grab my circle tool and just draw a circle around this tail here. That's pretty good there. Using this circle as a crop, I'm then going to make a detail. So from the View menu down to Detail Viewport. Here it asks me a few questions, such as what sheet should I put it on? Should I give it a drawing label? I'm going to say yes, I would like this to be number 3, and I'm going to call this Tail Detail. It's going to ask me a few other options here, such as classes, layers, and scales, but I'm just going to jump over those and hit OK. Now what you'll notice is it's placed this on my drawing with the nice little circular callout that I've asked for. It's also given it that lovely drawing label there, saving me a whole heap of work. But that's a detail that I can then scale up to, say, 4 times its size if I wanted to have a really close-up look at that tail piece. Just going to update that viewport as well. So that's a handy one. It saves a lot of time in terms of creation. Just a really quick sort of 3-step process that you can make, as opposed to having to create a new viewport, redo cropping, putting on all of your notation and such. It just makes a really nice little detail for you. The last one, and it's kind of a handy time saver if you're in need to push out a document, is that you can just simply create all of your top plan and isometric views with one simple click. What we're going to do here with my plane object is just go from the View menu and go create multiple viewports. We're going to select a scale, as I found ×2, and I'm going to use a 3rd angle projection on this one for front, top, and let's try a left and right hand side and an isometric. So I'm asking Vectorworks to make the front, top, right, left, and isometric all at once for me. Hitting OK. It's going to have a little think about that for a second, and it should be popping all of those onto a page for me. There we go, it's made it onto a new sheet layer. What you can see here is that it's just placed all of those viewports down for me. Top, front, left and right hand sides, and an isometric. Instantly it's just made those viewports for me, no effort at all. And from the View menu I'm just going to update all viewports, which should render those out for me, most probably in 3D. We'll just see what happens in terms of that. There is a difference between the first person and the third person projection there. That's something best explained by Wikipedia, really. Just have a browse on there. But you can see that's really easy to create. Just a very simple layout. We could have thrown those onto an A1 page and we would have been done, just like that. So I'm going to pretty much call that a day here. I might just increase the size of that sheet layer just to include all those objects. I would hate to not leave this project finished. Something like that, and then I can obviously rearrange. Probably don't need this one necessarily, but as you can see those all fit pretty well to a page there at 2 times. I normally put a sheet border on those and a title block. In fact, I can't leave this project without doing them. Pop that onto there. It's obviously got a border and stuff, and my standard settings that I like to use on an A1 page. There we go, it's that simple. I won't fill in the title block now, but that looks pretty good. This is pretty much the end of the VCAM 2013 series. I'm still going to be releasing content as I feel like it. If you have questions, make sure you ask them. If you'd like detailed descriptions on stuff in the future, please request in the comments below. If you're a subscriber, make sure you check out some of the previous videos that we've got going on here. I'm going to be looking at doing a Spotlight 2013 series coming up in the later half of this year, as well as the 2B series, which will run once again at the end of this year, as well as perhaps even a 3A series, which is kind of exciting. So stay tuned for all of those, and until next time, I'll see you soon. Cheers.